Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here in the afternoon as we continue our coverage, our special coverage of Victim Speaks Day. All of those trials that we covered this past year where the victims had an opportunity to speak against their accuser, against the accused. Let's focus right now on our trial for the next few hours. We are going to be covering, and this is a huge one out of Ohio, the Shawn Grate case. This man was charged with 23 counts, including aggravated murder, and really it was a bizarre tale where he was arrested after a young woman called 911 claiming that she was kidnapped by this man, sexually assaulted, and held against her will in his house. Police showed up at his house. He was arrested, and they found the bodies of two women, Elizabeth Griffith, who was 29 years old, and Stacey Stanley, 43 years old. He was charged with their murders, and that is the trial that we were facing, covering here on Law and Crime. And at one point during the course of this trial, my gosh, that woman who was referred to as Jane Doe, the woman who was rescued, she had an opportunity to testify against Grate. We're going to play that for you a little bit later, but right now as we recap this case, let's start with the prosecution's opening statement.
Interviews with law enforcement, confessed to every element of every crime with which he is charged. This is not a whodunit case. This is a he did it case. The discovery of this defendant's crimes began Tuesday, September 13th, 2016. At 6:48 a.m., a woman called 911 from 363 Covert Court in the city of Ashland. 363 Covert Court is a yellow two-story house sitting just a couple of feet from an identical-looking structure. Both houses are across the street from the laundromat on 4th Street. These houses are supposed to be vacant. At the time, they were owned by Pump House Ministries, and other than the laundromat, neither house, with the exception of the other, is near anything. But the defendant's privacy was spoiled on September 13, 2016. As a woman called 911 because she'd been kidnapped and was in fear for her life if the defendant awoke. As the officer looked back to where he had just been, he saw a hand in the window. Seconds later, they were able to open the door and extract a bruised, terrified, naked Lori Spillick from 363 Covert Court. When they went into the basement, they found a large pile of trash next to the stairs. And although they didn't see anyone, they will tell you the smell was unmistakable. Experienced officers know the smell well, and they will tell you it is unforgettable as it is unmistakable. After sweeping the house, the officers went outside. A call was made to the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, known as BCI, so that crime scene technicians could come and process the house for any evidence relating to Lori and her 911 call. But the smell of death told them there was going to be more to this story. Now, the defendant crawled through the window of lot 306, the camper immediately next door, where he stole food, supplies, a DVD player, a television set. She took back to lot 307, where he was living. Lot 306 is the camper of Pam Miley. Ms. Miley spent her summers in and out of that camper.
Wow, what a case. What a case. Let's break it down right now with trial attorney and Judge Quinton Washington is joining us right now. Judge, great to have you here on Law and Crime. I got to ask you, first off, have you ever seen a case quite like this one before?
Not that's beyond anything that came out of like Patty Hearst or any of the kidnappings that came out of California about 10 years ago. This is incredibly unique.
how is it possible that if this is all true, remember we're covering this trial, that he could have kept doing this on a continual basis? I mean, he had 2 bodies in his house, and then this third woman, if she didn't call 911, who knows what would have happened to her? How is it possible that he could have continued on this crime spree?
Well, I mean, the difficulty is that what reason would police have to go in there? Because unless they're called, they don't know of anything, which is why once investigations start, that's when police find out things. But otherwise, they'd have no reason to know if he's coming in and going out and acting normal. Why would people ever call to come? Why would people ever be called to go in his house?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, look, we have the insight because we get all the information as we're covering the trial. As you reviewed the case, what did you see as a pattern here? Because there seemed to be, the victims were women. They seemed to maybe be vulnerable. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think again, this was allegedly, because we haven't told what the verdict is yet. What do you think that he saw as these victims here? What do you think he was looking for?
I think many times when you have victims such as this, what happens is that the predators prey on certain characteristics such as meekness, such as not needing much involvement with the community or with the family. And so when they find them, they're able to slowly remove them from society, and no one really notices. And so then you have, when no one really notices, there's nobody for them to really reach out to, and the cycle just continues. And so I think that's what happened here until Jane Doe called out.
Yeah, and manipulating their interest in terms of religion. We're going to learn a lot more about this, particularly when the victim testifies. But when we come back from our short break, you're going to hear from officers who went into that house and found those bodies. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. We're recapping the Shawn Grate case out of Ohio. And you'll remember that authorities arrested this man after discovering the decomposed bodies of 2 women in his house, that of course, of 29-year-old Elizabeth Griffith and 43-year-old Stacey Stanley. Police went to his house because they got a 911 phone call from a woman who will be identified as Jane Doe, claims that Grate kidnapped her, held her against her will, and repeatedly raped her. She will testify in this case. We will play you her testimony a little bit later on in the program. But before that, let's go back to the officers who went to this house and discovered the bodies of these 2 women. Take a look.
Did you see anyone down in the basement?
Did not see anyone down in the basement.
Did you see the source of this odor?
There was a pile of trash right by the stairs where the insect infestation and the odor were coming from.
But could you see a body?
Could not see a body.
And when you were done clearing the house, what did you do?
I stood by there and secured the scene. I put out the yellow crime scene tape. I put it around both residences and part of the curtilage there around the home. That was later expanded out all the way out to 4th Street and Center Street, and we blocked Covert Court off.
And does another agency come in to help process crime scenes?
Well, our detective bureau obtained a search warrant, and BCI eventually was contacted. And,
Wow. Can't even imagine what it's like to be the officers walking to that house and seeing those decomposed bodies and collecting evidence. Judge, my question to you is, and the case against them is pretty strong. How do you defend Shawn Grate?
Well, I think there are a couple of things you can do. One is that you can say that there's some level of voluntariness by the woman who is Jane Doe. That doesn't take away from the 2 that were allegedly deceased because of his action. The other thing you can do is you can hope to find somebody else to point the finger at and say, this is somebody these are people who were in the house who were deceased, who my client did not have anything to do with. Or you could say that there's some mental health issue there that means that he should not be held liable. And criminal standard for what he's done.
All right, let's break some of that down. So the idea that she was, consented, it's going to be hard to convince a jury that a woman would consent to be in a house with decomposed bodies and she disappeared and no one knew what happened to her, right? That's a tough argument.
Oh, incredibly so. Incredibly so. But the issue is that, the U.S. has very strong fundamental property rights. And so what goes on in people's houses and what goes on people's property is something that they have a strong say-so with. And so you never can tell what people may be into. It sounds like a stretch, but at the same time, you never can tell what people may be into.
And the idea of insanity, did he not fully understand what he was doing? I mean, he seemed to have a disarming quality to him. As we talked about earlier, he knew what he was doing by manipulating these women, or allegedly manipulating these women, and getting them. So how could it be argued that he may want to plead the insanity defense?
Oh, you'd have to have a third party come in and give a test on that. There'd have to be competency that would be that a third party you'd be able to hang your hat on that. And until they get that, then it's not possible. But I'm just looking at different ways you could try to defend. One of them could be an insanity plea. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. We're not at the end of that, though. We still have to talk more about this case. We also saw the testimony of Ed Staley, a BCI agent. You might recall his testimony. This is another officer who was walking through the house, went through the closet, and found the body. I mean, his testimony really stays with you because this is one of the people that actually discovered the decomposed bodies of these women. Let's continue with his testimony.
The door itself. What are those white things?
Maggots, fly larvae.
And is that another step that you've already described in the fly reproduction cycle?
That would be before the fly pupae process, yes. We've opened the doorway completely now and looking in the closet and documenting what we found inside the closet.
On the door itself, what do you see there?
The white specks?
Yeah.
The white specks are maggots or fly larvae.
All over that side of the door?
Yes, sir.
Agent Staley, did you notice an odor when you opened the door?
Significant odor, yes.
Describe it, please.
It was deplorable.
Have you, Agent Staley, in the course of your employment as a police officer and specifically as an agent for BCI, responded to a scene where a decomposing body was present?
Many times.
That's a lot of what your job is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, it is.
Are you familiar then with the odor of a decomposing body?
I am very familiar with decomposition, yes. Not necessarily human, but just decomposition.
Okay. So the odor that you encountered when the tape was removed and the door was opened, was the odor that you encountered significant to you in your processing of this scene?
Yes.
What did you discover?
A human corpse.
What was the state of the human corpse that you discovered?
It was in a decomposition state, yes.
Okay. What did you see?
Upon removing some of the clothing, on the left side of the closet, the discovery of this human foot and this leg.
You know, Judge, as we listen to Ed Staley, clearly it's difficult for him to recount this, but also it's interesting from a legal and an investigative point of view. Maggots, decomposition, doesn't that tell you something about the crime?
Like when you're going through the stages of decomposition and death, it means that a death occurred, and there are ways in which you can pretty much estimate how long that body has been there or how long the person is deceased based on the stages of decomposition that he's talking about.
You know, just trying to understand how somebody could do this, live in a house like this, just commit these kinds of crimes. I ask myself these questions every time we cover these kinds of cases. My question to you is, if, found guilty, he is classified as a serial killer. Serial killers, is that rare? Is it rare to see serial killer cases?
Rarer than most, yes, because what the hope is that the police and that there can be some level of investigation that can be done to stop a serial killer before they become a serial killer. You want to catch them at, the hope would be of society is to catch them at murder 1 or to prevent murder before it happens to be murder 2, 3, 4, etc.
Do you think one of the reasons he was able to do this, again, allegedly able to do this, is because he had a disarming quality about him? I mean, when you look at his mugshot, he seems to be a nice-looking guy. You would never expect this. Is that something that you see a common trait?
Well, yes is the answer to that question, Jesse. But also, there's an adage that we use kind of in Georgia, and it's one of our little crime things that we say is if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
And because you have people riding on public transportation, and ever since we had the Richard Jewell, allegations here about the Atlanta bombings and all that stuff.
Sure.
That people say something. If they see something, they should say something. And what happens in many cases that people may think they see something that's a little odd, but people won't say anything.
Yeah.
And so he goes in and out of the house every day. Nobody says anything. She may come out. She may not. But nobody says anything because nobody feels like they should.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. And we're still trying to understand how this all happened. When we come back, we're going to play you more testimony about the discovery of these bodies. Stay tuned. And welcome back, everybody. Before we continue on with our coverage of the Shawn Grate case, let's go live right now to Aaron Keller with what's happening tonight on the Daily Debrief. Aaron.
Jesse, we're following breaking news out of California where authorities have just announced the arrest of 3 suspects in the deadly shooting of a police officer there in California. This just happened moments ago. The sheriff in California making that announcement. We are following the details. The sheriff completely flipped out about sanctuary city laws. We will break down their connection to what authorities there in California say happened in that deadly shooting. Also, we're monitoring legal documents filed in the case of a suspected Russian troll farm. These documents are aimed at special counsel Robert Mueller, and they contain some pretty bizarre statements. We're going to hash out exactly what's being said and why this accused Russian troll farm is saying that Robert Mueller has some naked selfies. That's the phrase people are focusing in on. Plus, latest defense for the Boston Marathon bomber. He was convicted, sent to death row. His defense attorneys have filed a more than 1,000-page motion asking an appeals court to look back at the case. We will explain their tactics in that case. That's coming up tonight on the Daily Debrief. Jesse, I know you will be there right along with me.
I know. What an honor it must be for you to have me there for the debrief.
It's the highlight of my life.
highlight of my life. I'll see you tonight. We have a lot to talk about. All right, everybody, let's go back right now to the Shawn Grate case. And when we last left off, we were just hearing the vivid and horrific descriptions by the officers who found these decomposed bodies in Shawn Grate's house. Let's continue on with the testimony of Ed Staley, that BCI agent.
When we zoom in a little bit, there are a couple of items on top of those bags of trash, which would have been underneath some other trash that you've removed. What do you see there?
There's a Polar Pop cup, air freshener, and a cigarette butt on the trash, the white trash bag.
And so in this photograph, we see an agent, a BCI agent, who's lifting up one of those bags.
Yes, sir.
Right there. And so what did you see? I'm going to zoom in a little bit. What did you see when that was lifted up?
There was maggots and pupae on the bottom of that one trash bag that he was exposing.
Okay.
What a house of horrors that was. Judge, one of the things that we're looking at is we're seeing the prosecution's case, really strong opening statement by the prosecution and some of their witnesses. One thing to note, the defense waived their opening statement. Why do you think they did that?
Well, I think part of it is the strategy. You want to have believability, but based on, if you're on the defense side, you know that there's going to be an overwhelming amount of information. Like when Detective Staley is testifying, he's going in graphic detail about descriptions of maggots and larvae, et cetera. You want to, when you present your case, you want to come across as much as possible as an honest broker. And by not having a flurry of the opening statements and showing what the defense or what the prosecution is not going to be able to prove and all that stuff, because you know you've got a ton of evidence. So the best thing to do is just where you do speak up, have it be important when you do speak up, and hopefully that can mitigate the impact that they're trying to have.
What do you think a jury thinks of that? And then again, we're attorneys. We understand how the procedure works in a criminal trial. They don't. I mean, not everybody does. So, but do you think they look at it differently?
A little bit, but the main thing they're going to be thinking about is when the defense does speak, what are they saying?
Right.
Because I don't know how much, if you really think about it from our perspective, how much testimony do you have to hear about some of these things to believe that that probably happened?
And speaking of, yeah, I was just going to say, speaking of the jury, this can't be an easy case for them to sit through.
Oh, no. But that's what they're hoping, that the prosecution's hoping that going over this graphic information with the amount of detail they're doing will hopefully overwhelm the jurors into saying, I need to convict because I want this to be over as soon as possible. Where the defense is hoping that when they do step up and say something, that they're able to say, well, hey, we're saying something that's so important, we don't have to, wave our hands and give long opening statements or anything like that. But when we say something's important, you listen to us because we're not going into all this graphic detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also have to think this is a death penalty case as well. So if they convict him, they also have to consider that. Not easy any which way. I'll tell you what, though, when we come back, we're going to play the testimony of that surviving victim, the woman who made that 911 phone call. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. Welcome back, everybody. We're recapping the Shawn Grate case. And you might be saying to yourself, well, how did this guy get apprehended? Well, he got apprehended because a woman called from his house, called 911, and says that she was being held against her will. She was sexually assaulted. And when police showed up, they found the decomposed bodies of 2 other women. Now, this brave woman, who was unidentified, she spoke in the courtroom. She was not filmed, but you could hear everything she had to say. We're going to play you her testimony right now. On a day where we're talking about the victim speaks, it doesn't get any more real than this. Take a listen.
Before he began taking the Bible out of your hands, how had he been? What was his name?
I think when I first pulled out the Bible, we just both sat down on the edge of the bed, and I was showing him the passages and reading them, and he was looking at it while I was reading it, and the Bible excites me. But I know I don't know if it felt like it didn't really have his attention right there, but I was gonna stop because I looked at him. And he's like, no, I'm interested, keep going. And so I started, reading again, I guess. And I think he'd gotten up to go to the kitchen, and I thought he was getting something to eat, because I'd also given him some food. So when we were first coming back to his apartment, or the house, he had food, so I thought he was just grabbing some of that food. And it was when he came back that he started pulling the Bible out of my hand.
How long would you say you had been reading before he came back?
Well, it wasn't very long at all. He was just maybe gone 15 seconds or something, or I don't know, 20 seconds.
So you weren't reading for a long period?
Oh, no.
What a shot, just that still shot right there of Shawn Grate and his attorneys listening to this alleged victim speaking. I mean, Judge, when you listen to this, it's very impactful. I'm curious your reaction to listening to her.
Yeah, I think it solidifies how he went about doing these. And it's important because if you show the part of what you have to do to show a serial killer is they had a pattern by which they did this stuff. And so he's doing it under the guise of them having a religious connection and then moving on to other connections that they have, which then he's able to create an environment which envelopes her so much so that she ends up being trapped in the house for a long period.
What's the motivation here? Is this about control? Is this about just having sex? What do you see it usually, what the motivation is? And maybe it's here the same thing as well.
It's a lot with control, but it's also the ability to have control over other people. Because there's like control in the way you want to do things with your life. And then when you try to have control over other people, which is what he was trying to do with her and the other decedents, that's where the nefarious activity takes place.
Right. And when we're watching this, we're looking just at the defense attorneys. What's going on in their minds? What are they listening for? What are they writing down? I'm curious your perspective on that.
How can I mitigate, and what can I mitigate as much as possible?
Yeah, that's easy.
Because
that's tough to do.
Yeah, there's not a smoking gun where you're going to come out and say, this is how I'm going to exonerate my client from this. It's more, how can I mitigate this? Because the evidence that they're showing is they're going to have an overwhelming amount of evidence about what happened, because you got a person who was in the house saying what happened in the house.
How much of what they're listening to are they considering for evidence in the sentencing phase? Because let's not forget, if convicted, he faces the potential of the death penalty.
Oh, yeah, they'll have her come back. They'll have her come back. Like, they'll have her talk more specifically about what she went through and what, they'll speak vividly. They'll invite her to speak vividly and graphically about what she went through in the sentencing.
But they're wondering what they can use and say, well, during sentencing it's a little different. Maybe we can argue against some of the things she said.
They can try, but the whole point of the victim impact statements is going to be just that, a victim impact statement.
Right.
Because when they call them up, they're not calling them up for direct cross-examination. They're like, we want you to give us a victim impact statement. How did this affect you? How did this harm you, et cetera? And so when you're getting up to the defense attorney, you're trying to say, well, that didn't really happen that way.
Yeah. It's an uphill battle. That's one way to look at it. I'll tell you what, when we take a break and when we come back, we're going to play more of this woman on the stand. So stay tuned here on Law&Crime. Welcome back to Law&Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on a special day where it's Victim Speaks Day, recapping all those trials from the past year where the victims of really horrific crimes had the opportunity to speak in court and testify against the defendant. Let's continue on with Shawn Grate. Now, as you know, we've been covering this case for the past hour or so, and Shawn Grate was charged with 23 counts, including aggravated murder. A young woman called 911 from this man's house, claiming that he abducted her, held her against her will, and basically sexually assaulted her multiple times. When police arrived at his house, they found the decomposed bodies of two other women, Elizabeth Griffith, who was 29 years old, and Stacey Stanley, who was 43 years old. And now, where we last left off, we were playing you the testimony of this woman who called 911. She's been referred to as Jane Doe. She has not been identified, and when she testified in court, she did not want to be filmed, only recorded. So we're going to continue on playing her testimony, and again, you don't have to see anything because the power of her words is just so impactful. Let's continue on.
So when he started pulling the Bible from my hands, I just looked up curious, what are you doing? And that's when he said,
Take your time.
There should be tissue right next to it.
thank you. That's when he says, you're not going anywhere. We started fighting.
In what way?
I tried to push him away and get up. I was just doing everything, trying to kick, punch, but everything I did, he just did it so much harder.
At some point, were you tied up?
Yeah.
How many times were you tied up?
At least 3.
Where were you tied?
he would always bind my wrists, my legs at times.
To what?
Sometimes to just weird positions.
So you were tied to the bed at some point, but you were also down without being tied to the bed. Is that correct? When you were not tied to the bed, you said you were tied in weird positions.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I don't know.
What, were you able to figure out his purpose
Something sexual.
while you were bound? Did he sexually assault you?
I can't remember. I don't know.
Just absolutely incredible. And how brave is she to take the stand and talk about what happened to her? We can't forget that she was the one responsible for Shawn Grate facing this trial. She called 911, and the police came there and found the dead bodies of 2 other women and rescued her. And now she took the stand and testified against him. I want to analyze this, though, right now. Back with us is, of course, trial attorney and Judge Quinton Washington. I'm curious, Judge, how do you properly prep a witness such as this? If you're the state, how do you prep her to testify in this capacity?
You bullet point it, but you don't want to try to over prep or have them memorize certain phrases or anything like that. You just bullet point things that you're generally going to ask them about. And you then, from talking to them, you gauge their demeanor as to how believable they'll be before the jury. And that's when you then go in and you may tweak it a little bit, but you don't want to over prep witnesses, because over prep witnesses kind of fall apart on us.
I agree, but this is a different kind of witness, because this witness is talking about really, really horrific conditions she was in. She's a religious young woman. They're talking about things that clearly she does not want to talk about. So how do you say, listen, you are going to have to get into the details of this sexual assault, and I know how awful it is to talk about, but how do you get her to open up? Because, again, the prosecution has to prove a case here.
Right. So I think what they did is something that was really interesting, because if you listen, when they were asking about what different positions they would have her tied up in, et cetera, part of what they didn't want to go too much into that, because you can just she can generally talk about the things to be able to make the case for rape, sexual assault, and all that stuff. But the specifics about what happened, which is what the defense may want to say that her memory's not good about, those are questions they need to ask. Right. So they're going to look difficult asking very specific questions. You don't remember on this night, did he tie you up this way or that way? Right. You're hoping that you can get her to contradict herself, but that's not something that you really care about.
Yeah, and if you're in that state, who knows the details that you can remember, how the events transpired. I mean, just think about what she went through. We are going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to finish up the testimony of this witness. And my gosh, when we talk about Victim Speaks Day, really, does it get any more real than this? We'll be right back. And we're back, everybody. So we're covering right now the Shawn Grate case. And where we last left off, we were playing the really impactful testimony of the victim. Let's talk about it a little bit more. What a brave woman who came on the stand. And remember, she was the one who called 911 and got police to Shawn Grate's house. And what you're hearing, clearly she didn't want to be videotaped. Her name didn't want to be released. We refer to her as Jane Doe. She is just recounting the horrific details of what happened to her. Very emotional testimony. Let's finish it out and really remember, there's a clue here, because something happened after she testified, and we're going to talk about it right after. And you might have to think that based upon how compelling her testimony was, this decision by the defense was made. We'll talk about it in a second. Let's play a little bit more of her testimony.
At least they knew my name.
Did you think you were ever going to leave that house?
I didn't really look ahead too much, you know. When I thought about it, it seemed impossible, though you know, how do you give up hope? I mean,
What'd you do with the taser?
when he sat up, I put everything down. In the hopes that I could at least tell him I was just trying to go to the bathroom.
Okay. And when he laid back down, back to sleep,
I picked up the cell phone. I don't remember the taser anymore.
when all of this happened, were you by the door? And at some point, were you able to get that door open?
Yeah. When the cops were already banging on the, like, I mean, they weren't banging, but I knew the cops were there and I knew they couldn't get in.
Did you have bumps and bruises? And
Yeah, it was pretty sore.
And after this, how long were you sore?
Over a week.
Several days.
Oh, yeah.
Did the bruises darken up?
I don't know.
Just absolutely incredible testimony there. And Judge, we can't forget the power or the impact of this testimony, because after she testified, Grate pled guilty to 15 of the 23 counts, and that included 4 counts of rape with sexually violent predator specifications. What did you make of that?
I think that what he's trying to do is take some level of ownership, because if you can take some level of ownership, you then give your defense strategy something different to be able to say, hey, we're cutting this short because we want to, acknowledge this and ask for mercy in sentencing.
You know, the judge asked Grate, why did you change your plea? And he said to keep from rubbing her face in it anymore. It sounds like he's trying to be a human being, but that can't be possible.
Well, he's trying to signal that at least to the jury, because when he's saying this, hopefully he's saying it, well, he's attempting to try to say this so the jury can hear this.
I'll tell you, Judge, the jury didn't hear this. This was outside the presence of the jury. All the jury knew was that these counts had been resolved. They didn't understand the what actually happened. So it's hard to say why he did this, but he did it. And I want to now move on to the 911 phone call, which is just equally as impactful. So let's play that for you right now.
911, what is the address to your emergency?
4th Street, Laundromat.
What's the problem?
I've been abducted.
Who abducted you?
Shawn Grate.
Where's she at now?
Asleep.
Where's she sleeping at?
In the bedroom. Please hurry.
Does he have a weapon?
He's got a taser.
Are you tied up now?
Yeah, but I kind of freed myself. Are they on the way?
Yeah, we have officers we're sending.
Please send them up.
Okay, if you're worried you don't have to talk, you can just set the phone down, okay? I just need to hear if the officers find you or not.
Oh, shit, I woke him up.
I just set the phone down. Okay, can you get to the door where you can see out? Huh? Can you get out of the house? It's locked. Are you at the door?
Yeah, I am.
She's at the door.
Hurry up, get out of here. Where is it?
I'm sleeping.
Still sleeping?
Yeah.
Okay, they have her.
He went on it armed.
Unarmed?
Yeah.
All right. Right now. You know it. Don't do that.
Judge, you can't help but think, isn't it remarkable that she's alive?
Very much so. Very much so, because the longer people stay in captivity, the less likely they are to be able to make it out. And so but I guess he thought that she was going to be the one that he married. So,
yeah, because remember, there were 2 bodies that were found in this house. Who knows how long she had left? And you talked about marriage, but what did that even mean to him? What did it even mean to have her? Did he treat her differently than any other woman? Honestly, we tried to see if there was a pattern here, and you talked about it a little bit earlier about vulnerable women, but I'm still having trouble trying to understand what happened.
oh no, definitely, because the question is that as long as you have those bodies decomposing in that house, how was that? It hadn't been mentioned between the 2 of them. And I'd be interested to see what she thought and what he thought about the conversation they had about what the smell was in that house.
Right, and this is my question to you. So the fact that he pled guilty to multiple charges but not the murder, he's telling the court, hey, listen, I may have had these bodies in my house. Doesn't mean I killed them. Is that the way that works?
That's the way they want to do. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to pivot and trying to get as many wins for their client as possible. But at the end of the day, it is likely he's going to have consecutive sentences, which means that he probably will never get out again.
Or the death penalty. Remember, that's on the table here. So the question is, how tough is it for a jury to sentence a man, even someone who would be convicted of these kinds of crimes, to death?
Not that difficult if you have alarming sets of facts like this, and you have so many charges that if you have 15 charges to which someone is pled guilty to, as we've already talked about, and it looks like they could spend the next 400 years in jail, then that's a significant amount of time to where if you're thinking about death penalty, it's something that you can think about. But at the same time, you do have the religious piece behind some people feeling as though that, they can't sentence someone to death, and that's not something that humans should be able to do in our justice system, et cetera. But once you get past that, you begin to look at it on the pragmatic side, it becomes an option that wasn't on the table before.
And when they were selected, they were selected because they could make an impartial decision about such an important decision. We're going to take a break, though. When we come back, we're going to play the testimony of Lisa Riley, who performed a sexual assault exam on the victim. We'll be right back. Back, everybody, with our continued coverage of the Shawn Grate case. We are recapping this trial in its entirety here on Victim Speaks Day, really recapping those trials from 2018 where victims provided crucial testimony against defendants, and really we just heard some amazing testimony from a woman who really could have died any moment at the hands of Shawn Grate, and she survived, called 911. The police went to his house, found the decomposed bodies of 2 other women, rescued her. And we just played you her testimony, but you always know that in sexual assault cases, the victims have to be examined. And that brings us right now to Lisa Riley. She performed a sexual assault exam on the victim, who we have deemed Jane Doe. I warn our viewers, it gets pretty graphic in terms of the injury sustained, but it's important because the prosecution is still building their case against Mr. Grate. Let's play that testimony right now.
The vagina works.
Okay. Now, as far as treatment is concerned with reference sexual assault, there is always the possibility of pregnancy, correct?
Correct.
And did you discuss that and the treatment side of that potential with Lori?
Yes, I did.
And what was the outcome of that?
It's a protocol that during this exam we give, first we have to do a pregnancy test to make sure that the victim's not already pregnant. And if it comes back negative, we give a pill it's called Plan B. It's to stop the pregnancy from happening. It doesn't abort a baby that's there.
Okay. And was there consent from Lori to such a treatment?
Yes.
Was she concerned about the possibility?
Yes, she was.
How concerned was she?
She had made statements to me that she was scared that she he could have gotten her pregnant, and she had made statements that she didn't know if he ejaculated into her.
Okay.
Okay, so this witness is talking about her exam of Jane Doe. Back here with Judge Quinton, Washington. What did you make of her testimony? And again, not easy for her to testify in this case.
Yeah, it was very compelling because basically she's recounting what actually happened at the time when she was going to take the exam to make determinations about pregnancy and about rape and all, etc. And some of the concerns that she had was that.
I think, Judge, we're cutting out a little bit, so maybe we'll have to call you back. But that's okay because we're going to take a break. But when we come back, we have a little bit more to talk about, including the defense's closing argument. Remember, they waived their opening statement, so let's see what they say in Shawn Grate's defense. We'll be right back. We're back, everybody, with the conclusion of the Shawn Grate trial, recapping such an incredible case here from 2018 where the victim had an opportunity to speak out against the defendant. We played you that testimony, but really strong case by the prosecution. What was the defense's argument? Let's turn now to the defense's closing argument.
During the time that he is talking to Detective Lay, Shawn tells Detective Lay, or there's a question that comes up about Elizabeth. And Detective Lay asks him to give a description of Elizabeth just so he can ascertain whether Shawn knows Elizabeth Griffith. Shawn admits that he knows who she is. He gives a physical description of her. After more discussion about Elizabeth, he says to Lay, she's set free. No more problems. She don't have to cry anymore. Then Detective Lay asks, how did you set her free? And the answer was kind of different, as you heard in the prosecutor's closing statement. Shawn's response.
Okay, that was the defense's closing argument. Judge, what did you make of it?
I mean, he's doing his resuscitation of the facts, but I don't know whether, given what we've heard, that resuscitation of the fact is enough to sway as much as he'd like for it to.
Well, I'll tell you right now, it didn't work. The jury found Mr. Grate guilty across the board. They recommended that he be sentenced to death. The judge agreed, and the judge actually wanted Grate executed in September, but that execution has been delayed because they filed a notice of appeal. What is the likelihood that he will be executed, I don't know, in the next 10 years, 20 years? What do you think is going to be the future for Shawn Grate?
There's a possibility of that, but it really depends because the death penalty cases, as a matter of law, are just attacked in so many different areas. Like, what's the method you're going to use for the death? They can argue that's cruel and inhumane. What's the amount of time that the appeals take to make the determination before you even get there? That can take a significant amount of time. So, I mean, many times the goal of the defense is to wrangle the prosecution until they make the decision not to go after the death.
Right, yeah, and let's not forget, he also has been implicated in the deaths of other women. Do you think that's a reason why it's being delayed, because he still has to be investigated and tried maybe for other crimes?
There's a possibility of that, but the whole goal is that hopefully you can get through the appeals process in such a short order that you can get to the death penalty, because what ends up happening is the reason when it takes the courts, whether it's at the state level or all the way up to all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, they many times weigh in on these death penalty cases because the ultimate price to pay, which is life, could get you all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Look, no sympathy for this guy. I mean, really, just a horrific set of circumstances. And that woman who testified, we're talking about Victim Speaks Day, she's the hero in all of this because she was able to make sure that he got apprehended, charged, sentenced, and really incredible. Right now, though, we have something special for you. In recapping 2018, here's a short segment on the top moments caught on court cam. Take a look.
I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime, and here are your top 5 caught on court camera moments of 2018. Number 5.
God! God! God!
A suspect in a double murder was denied bond in a Florida courtroom after screaming from a wheelchair during his bond hearing. 19-year-old Damon Kemp is accused of the fatal shooting of 19-year-old Trey Ingraham and 19-year-old Jordan Payton at their home in Daytona Beach. Kemp, who was reportedly staying with the 2 victims at their home, is seen being disruptive during his bond hearing.
God! God! God!
I've reviewed your arrest warrant to determine whether there's probable cause for your arrest.
That?
Kemp now faces 2 counts of second-degree murder. Number 4. A crazy melee unfolded in a Florida courtroom after a guilty verdict was read in a murder trial. Video shows the eruption of violence after the verdict was delivered in a murder trial with 4 defendants. 3 of the co-defendants can be seen brawling with their own defense attorneys and court bailiffs. Once order was restored to the court, all 4 defendants were sentenced to life in prison. The 4 men were convicted in the shooting death of 28-year-old Courtney London in 2016. Number 3. A man in Oregon was caught on camera trying to grab an officer's service weapon during his trial in a Lincoln County courtroom. 27-year-old Scott Patrick Lemon can be seen quickly standing up and unsuccessfully lunging for the gun of a Newport police officer before being tackled to the ground by another officer. Lemon was convicted for robbing 2 guests at a beachfront condo in Newport with a fake gun. Number 2. A judge in Washington state played the role of court officer and chased down 2 handcuffed inmates who made a run for sweet freedom in his courtroom. The inmates, 22-year-old Tanner Jacobson and 28-year-old Cody Howard, saw an opportunity to escape and went for it. That's when Judge R.W. Buzzard surprised everyone and leapt into action, chasing down the fleeing inmates. Buzzard was able to apprehend Howard before he exited the building. Jacobson was caught by officers a few blocks away. Here's the number 1 caught on court camera moment.
We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Daniel Villegas was found not guilty of murder, ending a 25-year saga that included 3 trials and appeals. Villegas faced capital murder charges for the 1993 fatal shooting of 2 teens in El Paso and served 18 years in prison prior to his acquittal. Villegas, who was 16 at the time of the killings, faced his first trial in 1994, which ended in a mistrial, but was convicted during a second trial a year later, receiving a life sentence. The bittersweet moment of his acquittal was caught on court camera.
We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
That was the number 1 caught on court camera moment. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Some pretty outrageous moments. Who knows what 2019 will bring? Judge Washington, thank you so much. And everybody stay tuned. The Daily Debrief with Aaron Keller's coming up.